Welcome to Travel, Pray, Slay, a podcast for professional women who travel, love God, and are ready to level up their life. On the podcast, we discuss all things travel, faith, career, love, and lifestyle, all focused on helping you take the next steps you need to bring your visions into reality and live the extraordinary life God created for you to live. If you love Jesus, Beyonce, and catching flights, then look no further because you have found your tribe, sis. I'm your host, Toya Nicole, and I can't wait to get into today's episode with you. Hey, y'all. It is Toya Nicole, and I am back. I am so excited to be back doing the Travel, Pray, Slay podcast. I know it has been a while, but we are back. We are rebranded, and we are here to help you level up your life. So if you listen to the trailer I released last week, then you know that the podcast is back, and we're going to be all things travel, faith, lifestyle, relationships. Still me, still everything to empower you to live your best life, to travel smart with style, to discover your purpose, expand your world, all of those things. It's just now we are really focused on, again, like really travel, pray, and slay. So we got some fashion episodes coming to you. I've got an episode coming, just around like my personal journey. And today we're going to get into a travel episode. So it has been since 2019, I think in the fall was the last podcast I recorded. And then 2020 hit. I went through some life transitions at the end of 2019. So I got busy with life and a relationship at the time. And then I was like, I'm going to get back in the podcasting in 2020. And we all know what happened. So with travel totally being shut down at the time, it definitely didn't make sense for me to continue to podcast about travel. So as a vaccine has rolled out and as the world is starting to open again, outside is open, as people say, I wanted to get the podcast back going. And in the time that I have had off, I've had an opportunity to rebrand it and to really think about the direction moving forward. So I'm so excited for old listeners that are still here and for some new folks that have joined us. I am Toya Nicole. I'm based out of Dallas. I'm a travel influencer, a digital marketing specialist, and I'm a diversity and inclusion leader for a marketing agency. For those that don't know about me, just real quick, I started a travel blog. I used to have a travel blog called Miss Travel Chic in 2012. That blog then kind of like transitioned over a time into Travel, Pray, Slay. And then that is what brought about the podcast in 2018. So I've been doing this. Back then, you were a blogger. You were an influencer in 2012. So it feels weird to say that because I remember the blogging days. So I've been at this for about 6 years. I've been podcasting for going on 3 years because I had another podcast with a girlfriend of mine. And we started that podcast in really 2016. So I've been podcasting close to 4 years. So anyway, here we are, top of 2021, kicking things off with a new season, a new look for Travel, Pray, Slay. So as I said, 2020 was a dumpster fire of a year. And one of the things that was impacted was obviously travel. And so I don't know about you all, but it was very difficult at the time. My boyfriend and I literally had so many trips planned, and, we were going to be going to Belize. It was going to be a Cabo trip in there, San Diego. And I'm sure, like the rest of y'all, I sat there and watched as the news kept rolling in, flights were being canceled, hotels were shutting down. And it really obviously started to hit us in April that, we're not going anywhere. And so travel, all those dreams, I knew people who had big birthday plans. One of my friends was going to Paris for the first time and she was so bummed. So, it's been a year, y'all. It has officially been a year since, the first cases of COVID in America started to be reported. It's been a year since places started closing and we started doing stay at home orders. And so now that it's been a year, we have figured some things out as a country, still working through some things. But because it has been a year and there's a vaccine that is actually out there, what you are seeing now are people starting back to travel. So this podcast is really about how you can travel safely during a pandemic. I have traveled since the pandemic and I don't have a vaccine. I have never been infected with COVID-19. Fingers crossed, prayers up. So I just wanted to share some of my lessons from traveling during this time and then just talk a little bit through what's most important, what the experts recommend and the CDC when you're traveling. I know there's some hesitancy out there. I know there are folks who, should I do it? What's the best way? Like, I haven't even been in the airport. What does it look like now? So that's why I'm here for you. So my first trip during the pandemic was in the summer. So obviously we were still at the height of COVID and we were feeling that part of not being able to get out, being at home, just really being stuck. That was when the fatigue really started to settle in. And so I totally did not obviously feel safe at the time doing air travel. So settled on a road trip. So my first trip was actually a road trip. As I said, I'm based in Dallas. So we took a road trip down to Austin and rented an Airbnb for a few days in the Austin area of Lake Travis. So it's really outside of the city limits. And that was big too. It was like, you know what? I just want to be like at peace. It was June. So it was shortly after the George Floyd murder by the Minneapolis police. It was protest on every day. It was a very difficult time. And as a Black woman, I took all of that in. And so we really wanted to get away somewhere truly where we feel like we could unplug, as well as being away from all the hustle and bustle of the city. And because it's Texas and Texas started opening up early, one of the states that started opening up things, restaurants were actually open. So we took that road trip. And then the next trip that I took after that was to Chicago. So that was in the fall. That was in October. So at this point, people were starting to get out more, travel. I had heard friends say, oh yeah, like just wear your mask or, they're skipping middle seats, etc. So I did a Chicago trip in October. Then I did a trip to Denver a couple of weeks later with a girlfriend. So that was like a girls trip. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So those were two airport experiences. It was a little different. So I'll talk about that because at this point, everybody had started back traveling and I felt it was very crowded in the airport. And then at the top of this year, January, I took my first international trip just to Mexico. Mexico isn't far, but it's technically still international. And I went to Cabo. And so that was more of a true like vacation, resort type of situation. Totally different experience than just like taking a trip to Chicago, etc. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So I've done both a road trip and, I did another road trip down to Houston in August. I went to visit my sister. She had just got a negative COVID test because she works in healthcare and she had not seen any family, obviously, since like Christmas. So I went down there to spend a weekend with her. So that was just an easy little trip and I stayed with her. So that's where I've gone. And again, while it wasn't the same as traveling before, we even had fears of catching a virus, it was good to be able to still enjoy it. And it's likely looking like 2022 before things likely get back to normal. But I do believe there's still a safe way to travel. So I want to start with a disclaimer. By no means am I saying go out there and travel. You have to do what's comfortable for you. And obviously, staying at home stops the spread. We've all learned that, right? When we stay at home, we stop the spread because we're not interacting with anyone. But I do believe, as well as the experts have shared, as well as, people that have to go to work now and people that have to do essential travel, have been able to showcase that you can still move about safely if you follow precautions. So don't come in my DMs talking about I'm telling y'all to get out here, because I am not. If you don't feel comfortable, don't, because I get it. But if you feel comfortable traveling and you're ready and you want to go about it safely, you just don't want to jump out there all willy-nilly. That's what this podcast is about. Okay, cool. So I want to start with a few tips. This is kind of even before you get ready to plan your next trip. You want to check on travel advisories and the status of COVID-19. So the main source for that, the legit source for that, is the CDC. I mean, no matter how you may feel about the government or whatever, like at the end of the day, the CDC is where we need to get our information. Not CNN, not MSNBC, and what Chris Cuomo or Don Lemon are saying. Trust me, go right to the CDC. So if you go to cdc.gov/travel, they actually list out a full list of travel health notices. And you actually are able to see a huge map of the world. Remember, COVID-19 is impacting everyone, and it's impacting different countries differently, obviously. And you can see the risk level. So it's 1, very low risk, moderate, high, and then like very high. And it's like 4 levels. So that's one way for you to like kind of just get a gauge, especially if you're thinking of international travel, like where are the cases with the lowest? I remember like very early on when people did start traveling last summer, 2020, a lot of people were going to the Caribbean, cases were low, and it was, they required a COVID test to get in. Some people wanted to go to Mexico. It wasn't that the cases were low, it was just they didn't require a negative COVID test. All of that information is out there. So I would say that's first. And you also want to be able to look on there too, because you want to be able to determine, are they even allowing US visitors? I mean, because America did not get COVID-19 under control the way that we should have, we can't just go everywhere. Like countries are like, no, thank you. And pretty much if you are going to be able to come over there, they're going to require a negative COVID test. So all of that information is on the cdc.gov. You can click on your destination, and then you can get more information from like their embassy, their State Department. Generally, what I'm seeing is that most require a negative COVID test within 3 days of departure. So that means if you are leaving out on the 15th, you would have had to show that you had a negative test by the 12th. So they need to know that within 3 days you tested negative. I don't know how the vaccine is going to impact that. Like I keep hearing rumors that in order to even get on a plane here in the US, you may have to show that you're vaccinated or to enter. No one has made that required yet that I know. It's definitely not in the US. I don't know of a country yet that has said that, just because the vaccine rollout has been so slow. But again, that can change. So obviously that's for international. When I went to Mexico at the top of the year, there was no requirement. My understanding is there still is no requirement to get into Mexico. So what happened was when I got there, they had you fill out this survey, and it was like, have you came in contact, etc. The hotels and different places were taking temperatures. So very much what we're doing here domestically, like if you go into the gym or your doctor's office or a restaurant, they're taking your temperature. But it was not required to have a test. So, I mean, that is one of the reasons why Mexico is actually on like the high risk. It's not necessarily because of the cases. The CDC also looks at the measures they're taking. So, if you're not requiring a negative COVID test to enter into the country, that is a risk, and it is a risk that you take. And that is why you protect yourself, which is what I'm going to get into soon. So then you have to think about getting back. So under the new administration with Joe Biden, one of the federal mandates is now all US citizens entering back into the US when they've gone on international travel have to have a negative COVID test. So literally the day that I was leaving Cabo to come back here, they put out that information. Like the CDC kind of had already started to recommend it. And then once Biden was inaugurated, my understanding is, he mandated it like federally, but they had already recommended it. And so they had sent out a notice. It was with my resort, like, although I was already there and had finished my trip, I guess just because I was on the newsletter list. And they basically were sending out an email of like locations that you could go to. And that's a bummer. Like, I am glad that I got my trip out the way, because I can tell you like that I would not have wanted to be on vacation and try to find a COVID testing center, take a test, get the results. Obviously, there's fees associated with that, I'm sure. I don't think they were free. You don't know how much it's going to be. What if something happens and you don't get your results in time? You're trying to board a plane to get home, right? So that seems to be a requirement now. So if you do choose a destination outside of the US, you really want to get all that information beforehand. So contact wherever you're staying and ask them, do they know about testing locations? Is it rapid test results, etc.? Because you do have to have that within 3 days of departure. So I know my cousin was planning to go to Cabo a couple of weeks after me. And when he saw that information, he just decided to postpone his trip because, it's just a big barrier, right? So all of that is what's most important. Obviously, if you're going domestically, the rules are different. There is currently no requirement for COVID testing. Hawaii may be the exception. I know they also were making people like quarantine. Obviously, that's the USA, but because it's a big vacation spot, they have certain restrictions. So, but if you just want to go to San Diego right now, you don't have to worry about that. You don't need to necessarily check the CDC. But what you do need to do is my second point, which is really plan out your destination activities. So check with where you're staying and understand what are their safety guidelines, right? So when I went to Chicago and I booked my hotel, obviously, there was information on the website and in the email, this restaurant is closed, this. But I called and I was just like, hey, I just want to get understanding of, what the routine is there. Are people wearing masks? How does room service work? How does housekeeping work? Get all of that information just so you feel comfortable. The one rule that has been put in place, which I really like, is that no one is in the room 24 hours before you. So we all know the world pre-COVID. I mean, they literally could be getting your room ready from someone just checking out 30 minutes ago, right? Where now they will not put you in a room that has not been vacant for 24 hours. And that's good because, as we know, COVID can live on certain surfaces for several hours. And so even after they clean it, they don't book it for another 24 hours. That reassured me. The other thing is that while you are staying there, most hotels are not offering housekeeping, meaning that they're not going to come in there every day, change your sheets, etc., just because that allows for interaction and contamination for both parties, right? So know that in advance, right? So that means that when you check in, make sure you got all the towels that you need. Think about it as it relates to whatever you generally use housekeeping for. For me, it's usually like towels and stuff like that. But I mean, I have been known to be maybe a little a little messy because I know housekeeping is coming, right? So keep that in mind. Like, you want to tidy up, you want to throw out your trash every day because no one's coming in there to clean up after you, especially if it's a couple of days trip, right? Get all that information. Now, when I was in Cabo, because it was a resort and it was different, they did offer housekeeping. And I wasn't expecting it, actually. I guess I thought I asked, but I don't know. So when She came knocking on my door. She actually scared me because I was out on the balcony and like I look up and she's like standing with the patio door and I'm like, oh, who are you? Why are you here? So it was optional, right? And it was like, sure, you can, switch out my towels or whatever. So just find that out. Okay, y'all, I'm just interrupting this episode briefly to remind you about the Travel, Pray, Slay merch. Did you know we had an online shop? Well, if you want to make a statement and slay, then you have to head over to travelprayslay.com/shop and check out all our merchandise. We've got hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, accessory bags, and luggage tags, which are my favorite. We've got everything in the online shop you need for your next trip. And whether that's a trip to Paris or just your daily trip to Target, you still want to make sure that you slay, sis. So head over to travelprayslay.com/shop and pick up some merch today. The other thing is Airbnb. So as I said, the first trip I took was a road trip and it was Airbnb. I like that, especially if you're driving to the location. You can bring your own stuff. So I actually brought sheets and pillows from the house and cleaning products. So, and we did our own cooking because it had a kitchen. So we stopped at HEB. All my Texas folks know about HEB. Picked up food for like breakfast. And we were like, one night, let's do tacos. And then as soon as we got to the Airbnb, I cleaned and wiped down everything. And I stripped the sheets and all the bed linen and replaced it with what I brought down. Now, the Airbnb also did the same thing. He let us know that there had been no one there for a few days because he actually only rents the Airbnb on the weekends. And outside of that, it's just his, extra home on the property. But I still cleaned anyway. So doing an Airbnb and doing a road trip actually gives you the ability to bring your own things with you, right? So think about Airbnb options. Even if you're flying somewhere, you just may find it more comfortable, like I said, because you can get your own food, especially if you're going to a destination where there's still like a lack of indoor dining. Like some cities like LA and Chicago are still slowly opening up. And that's the point of that too. Understand what's open, what's not. So that trip, when I went to Chicago, they had just put in restrictions. They had opened up indoor dining, but because cases went back up, they changed it. So it was like, okay, I knew that beforehand. So when I picked a hotel, I actually picked a hotel by Grant Park and the lakefront because outdoor activities are actually going to be your best bet when you're traveling during COVID. And so that was great because it allowed me to, when I did want to meet up with friends, it was like we can walk in the park, wear our masks, grab coffee. We were outside. Also like ran on the lakefront every day. Obviously the gym wasn't open. The hotel was not, they were doing like a modified breakfast. So the location was near like Starbucks and different places that I knew were open. And it was right next door to a Trader Joe's. So as soon as I got there, I went to Trader Joe's, got some wine, got some snacks. So keep that in mind too. If you are going to a location where a lot of restaurants are not open, then think about like what your options are going to be. If it is mainly outdoor, are you picking a place that's near a lot of outdoor dining options? So keep that in mind. Or are you picking a place where you can do a lot of hanging out outside? We went to Austin. Like I said, we were in Lake Travis and the Airbnb was right off the lake. So we spent time outside. We did go to a restaurant. If you're ever in Austin, you have to check out the Oasis. If you're ever in the Lake Travis part outside of Austin, it was great. So everywhere that we dined was outdoor dining. We went to Denver, obviously a lot of outdoor dining, and then we went hiking. So one of the excursions that we decided to do was like a Rocky Mountain like tour and a hike. So again, a perfect activity that's COVID safe because you are outside. When I went to Cabo, all the resort dining was outside. So there was one night where they did a buffet and it was a show that was outside as well too. It was a lot of people because like it was everybody from the resort, but the tables were spaced out. I felt comfortable. It was outside. And the great thing about the buffet is that, they had everything covered and the servers were on the other side with masks and they were serving it to you. So you couldn't like reach in there and like grab a big hunk of guacamole. So that made me feel safe. I did not go to any clubs or hang out or anything like that. Like, it's just for me, during the whole pandemic, actually, I have not gone to a bar. I have not gone to a club. I realize they're open, but I also realize that those places, it is hard to social distance. Social distance is not encouraged. Like you're hanging out and partying. So I just have avoided that. So again, you can't do that. You can't do crowded restaurants. You can't do concerts. So finding different other things you can do on the trip. And so all of these two are just before you get there, right? Checking the CDC and travel notices, planning out your destination activities. So now you're finally on the trip. What you need to do is make sure before you depart to gather your PPE. So mask up clearly. So all airline travel requires you to wear a mask if you are 2 years or older. So only babies under 2 don't have to wear a mask. I suggest buying a pack of the disposable ones. I also suggest a face shield just because the airlines are no longer skipping seats. And it's just something weird about having somebody sitting right next to you. And even though they're wearing a mask, like the face shield on the plane just made me feel more comfortable. And I wore it still with my mask, so it doesn't replace it. But the reason I recommend disposable ones is because, like, once you get off the plane, you throw it away. Put on another one. Once you get out the airport, throw it away. Like, I just wanted, and I threw my face shield away too, right? It wasn't the same face shield I wore coming back. I just felt comfortable because the airport is a pretty high exposure area. Now, the airplane, ironically, is actually a low risk activity because of the HEPA filters in the airplane cabin are circulating like fresh air. So it's not like recycling the same air, where like in most restaurants, gyms, indoor, that's like the same air. So this whole concept of like if somebody has COVID, coughs it into the air, it like trickles. Well, the filters that they use on airplanes don't allow that same air to keep going in. So it's actually, they say once you're on the airplane is like the best. But again, the disposable ones are great because every time you go somewhere with the mask on every day, you can just like switch it out and you just throw them away. So you can buy the little, surgical looking ones at most places now in bulk. I would also do disinfectant wipes for the plane. So I know they sanitize everything. Great. Still gonna clean it myself. So I got disinfectant wipes. And when I get on the plane, I wipe down the armrest, all the buttons. I wipe down the tray table, anywhere where I'm gonna place my hands or place like my iPad or my phone. And so those are just good to have. Even once you get to the hotel, you can use those as well too. And because they're wipes and not the spray, you don't have to worry about trying to put it in a travel bag or whatever in your little 3-ounce situation. And so I wipe down like the remotes and everything in the hotel too. So again, those disinfectant wipes are fairly easy to come by now as well too. Obviously keep your sanitizer every time I was on a trip, every time, even when I was like down at the pool in Mexico and on the beach, I had my sanitizer on me. So you'll have your PPE, you'll have your mask, sanitizer, disinfectant, the essentials, right? So you really just, from there, just try to enjoy your trip as much as possible. If you've got everything planned out, you know where you're going, you're being safe, now is your time to enjoy the trip. Unfortunately, it's not like it was before where we could just wing it and we could just show up in the destination and see what happens. We have to plan ahead now during this pandemic travel. And you have to kind of know where you're going and have everything prepared on you. So, but with that, you can still enjoy and do it safely. So your trip is over now and you're back home. So the last point is just post-trip follow through. And again, I go back to the experts, the CDC guidelines, and they recommend that after a trip that you essentially quarantine for 10 days. Now, if you don't decide to get a COVID test to confirm your status, then quarantine for 10 days. And during those 10 days, you need to monitor your symptoms, keep to yourself. Obviously, that's what quarantine means. Some people don't get that part. It does not mean go out to the gym and interact with people there. It does not mean go to brunch. It literally means stay home for 10 days. If you are planning to get a COVID test, they say to get the test 3 to 5 days after travel, and your quarantine is more 7 days after your test. So it's essentially still the 10-day rule, but now you will have a test to actually validate that you're negative, and they tell you to wait 3 to 5 days after you return. So I did that when I got back from Cabo. Again, I knew that was a little more high risk. It was international. I was at a resort, although it was so easy to socially distance while I was there. There wasn't a lot of people on the resort. And this was actually the first flight that I took where I did not have anyone in the middle seat, like the plane wasn't crowded, right? So there weren't a lot of people on the plane. So I actually felt safer. My Chicago and Denver flights were insane, so crowded, full flights. It was totally uncomfortable. But anyway, I got back from Cabo on a Wednesday, and I went and got tested 6 days after I got back. But during those 6 days, I did not interact with anybody. I did not see anyone. I kept to myself, never had any symptoms. And on that 6th day, I went and got tested. I did a rapid test, which means after I tested, I got my results within an hour. Like by the time I left and went back home, I already got the call that I was negative. And that next day made day 7. So I was good because per CDC, tests 3 to 5 days after travel, quarantine, for 7 days. So at that point, it was day 7. I had a negative test and I didn't have any symptoms. So I felt like I followed the guidelines and I felt like it was safe, that if I did want to see, friends or family that are in my COVID bubble, please understand that I basically kind of hang out with the same group of people, the same family in general. If I do hang out with new people, we definitely wear a mask or we make sure it's outdoor, or we socially distance, etc. So those are the rules. So I want to hear from you. Have you traveled during this pandemic? If so, what was your experience? How do you feel about it? Do you think we're all crazy for being extra precautious? Please don't say so. But I want to know that. Are you still afraid to travel? Tell me that too. Hopefully, even if this podcast did not put you at ease, perhaps it gave you just some more information. As I said, cdc.gov is to where I decided to go to for my source. You can take a look there if you're thinking about going to a specific destination. If it's domestic, obviously go on that county's website and understand where they are in their COVID-19 reopening phases and what's going to be there. If you're traveling internationally, you can go to the State Department's websites and understand, or the CDC travel health notices. So y'all, we're almost through this. I'm so grateful a vaccine is there for people who want to take it. I understand that not everybody does, but although we've reached this grim milestone of the number of deaths, it is good to see the numbers trending downwards. It is good to see more people being vaccinated. And so hopefully we are nearing the end of this. And I know everyone wants things to get back to normal, but we all want to stay safe and healthy and well. So if you do plan to travel, follow these tips. If you've got some tips of your own that I missed, just let me know. And I will talk with you all next time. Bye. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to check out the show notes, you can head over to the website, travelprayslay.com. I would love to connect on social media, so be sure you are following me on Instagram at Travel, Pray, and Slay, and Facebook at Travel, Pray, Slay. Again, Instagram is at Travel, Pray, and Slay. And if you love this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player, and be sure to leave a review. Thanks for listening, and you'll hear from me soon.